Elon Musk was asked to leave first class because of his hat, but no one on the flight realized he held the power to determine the airline's future. When a video of the incident went viral on social media, chaos quickly ensued. The unfolding events would bring arrogance, regret, and life-changing decisions to the forefront, culminating in an unexpected conclusion. The first-class cabin on the flight from New York to Los Angeles exuded luxury. Plush leather seats, soft golden lighting, and the hushed conversations of the affluent. It was an atmosphere of exclusivity, where every detail radiated sophistication. For Sarah O'Connor, the lead flight attendant, this space was her responsibility, a realm she meticulously upheld as a representation of the airline's prestige. Dedicated, confident, and a perfectionist by nature, Sarah prided herself on delivering seamless service. However, beneath her polished exterior, personal struggles weighed on her. A series of arguments with her husband had left her emotionally drained. Still, she was determined not to let it affect her performance. As boarding began, everything proceeded smoothly. The first-class cabin filled with familiar figures, celebrities, executives, and influential personalities. Among them were a young professional in an immaculate suit, a refined elderly couple, and a sunglasses-wearing artist. It seemed like another routine flight until a particularly high-profile passenger arrived. Elon Musk. Dressed casually in a jacket, jeans, and a red Make America Great Again hat, Elon's presence sparked a subtle shift in the cabin's energy. Sarah's eyes landed on the hat, and unease coursed through her. To her, it symbolized division, an overt political statement that felt out of place in the refined confines of first class. Passengers exchanged glances, the whispers growing louder. The executive in seat 3A turned to Sarah with a frown. "Miss O'Connor," he said quietly but firmly, "I can't believe this airline tolerates such things. This is first class, not a venue for political grandstanding. Something needs to be done." Sarah maintained her professional composure. "I understand, sir. I'll address it immediately." She approached Elon, who had settled into his seat and seemed unaware of the brewing tension. When he noticed her, he removed his headphones and smiled politely. "Is there a problem?" he asked. Sarah hesitated, but then spoke with practiced calm. "Mr. Musk, some passengers have expressed discomfort regarding your hat. To maintain harmony during the flight, we'd appreciate it if you could consider removing it." Elon's brow lifted slightly. "My hat? It's causing discomfort?" His tone was polite but carried a hint of challenge. "I didn't realize it violated any airline policy." "There's no specific rule against it," Sarah admitted, her cheeks warming. "But in first class, we aim to ensure that all passengers are comfortable." Elon leaned back in his seat, his gaze steady. "I'm not disrupting anyone. I'm sitting quietly, wearing my hat. What's the issue here exactly?" Before Sarah could respond, the executive in 3A interjected, his irritation evident. "The issue, Mr. Musk, is that your hat is inappropriate for this setting. It's offensive to some of us." Tension in the cabin thickened as some passengers nodded in agreement while others observed silently. An elderly couple exchanged concerned glances while the artist in sunglasses finally spoke up. "Everyone's overreacting," she said, her tone calm but firm. "It's just a hat. Are we seriously making this into a major issue?" Sarah felt the pressure mounting. The executive's voice rose again. "Ms. O'Connor, I expect this airline to handle the matter promptly. If not, my company may need to reevaluate our business relationship with your carrier." Sarah looked from the executive to Elon, her composure wavering. The atmosphere was fraught with tension, and for the first time in her career, she felt truly cornered. In the background, murmurs grew louder, and Sarah knew she needed to act, but every option felt fraught with consequences that extended far beyond this single flight. Sarah's voice trembled slightly as she stepped out of the cabin to collect herself, her mind racing with the weight of the situation. Little did she know that her next decision would send everything spiraling in ways she could not imagine. At the rear of the cabin, she leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths, trying to regain her composure. "I can't lose control," she whispered, attempting to steady her nerves. The pressure from the passengers, combined with her own conflicting emotions, made her feel like she was balancing on a razor's edge. When she returned to the first-class cabin, the atmosphere was even more tense. The young businessman in seat 3A was no longer seated. He stood glaring at Elon, his voice loud enough to carry across the cabin. "Mr. Musk, this is not the place for political statements," he declared. "I paid for peace and comfort, not to be confronted with such a divisive symbol." Elon, still relaxed in his seat, met the businessman's heated expression with a mild smile. His response was calm, almost dismissive. "I don't recall your peace being disrupted by a hat. I'm not disturbing anyone or breaking any rules. Perhaps the issue lies with your feelings, not with me." A few passengers chuckled quietly at Elon's remark, but the businessman's face only grew darker. He stepped closer, his voice rising. "The problem is your hat. It's a symbol of division and discrimination. Do you think you have the right to wear it here without considering how it affects others?" Sarah quickly moved to intervene, positioning herself between the two men. "Sir, please return to your seat," she urged, trying to maintain her authority. "We don't want any further escalation during this flight." The businessman shot her a pointed glare. "And what are you going to do about this? Is the airline going to take responsibility, or should I reconsider my company's entire contract with you?" The veiled threat sent a wave of anxiety through Sarah. She knew the businessman was a highly valued customer, one whose loyalty brought significant revenue to the airline. Yet, forcing Elon to remove the hat, when he wasn't violating any explicit rules, seemed equally untenable. On the opposite side of the cabin, an elderly man from the couple in seat 2D chimed in, gesturing toward the businessman. "I agree with him. That hat doesn't belong here. We've flown with this airline for years, and this is the first time I've felt this uncomfortable." His wife nodded in agreement, adding softly, "It's unsettling. It shouldn't be allowed." Sarah tried to respond diplomatically. "I understand your concerns, sir, ma'am. I assure you we're doing everything we can to address this and ensure everyone's satisfaction." From her seat nearby, the artist, who had been quietly observing the commotion, finally removed her sunglasses and spoke, her voice calm yet commanding. "Everyone's overreacting. It's just a hat. I don't agree with everything it represents, but does it really affect our experience? Or is this just an excuse to vent personal frustrations?" Her comment caused a ripple of unease among the passengers, some visibly reflecting, while others remained firmly rooted in their discontent. The businessman, however, was unmoved. "You may feel that way, but it doesn't mean the rest of us should have to endure this," he snapped. Sarah turned to Elon, who seemed utterly unbothered, flipping through a magazine as if the entire confrontation were beneath his notice. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Mr. Musk, she said firmly. "I understand that you have the right to wear whatever you choose. However, this situation is clearly escalating, and I'm asking you to consider removing the hat for the sake of a peaceful flight." Elon looked up, meeting her gaze with the same polite but resolute demeanor. His tone remained courteous, but there was an unmistakable edge. "Miss O'Connor, I've already made it clear that I'm not violating any rules. If others are uncomfortable, that's their emotion to manage, not my responsibility. I'm sitting here quietly, disturbing no one. So, what's the real issue here?" Sarah felt her resolve faltering, the mounting tension pressing down on her. Behind her, the businessman's voice rang out again, louder this time. "If this airline doesn't do something, then I will," he declared, stepping even closer to Elon. The air in the cabin was electric, the conflict teetering on the brink of chaos. Sarah immediately turned back, stepping in front of the businessman to block his path. Her voice, now firm and louder, echoed through the cabin. "Sir, please return to your seat immediately. This is not the way to resolve the matter." The elderly couple murmured loudly to each other, their voices adding to the cacophony. Around the cabin, other passengers discreetly pressed their call buttons, signaling for assistance. The tension hung heavy in the air, and Sarah could feel the situation slipping further from her control, the weight of expectations pressing down on her like a physical force. Elon placed his magazine on the tray table, his movements deliberate and calm. He turned his gaze toward Sarah and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "I didn't come here to argue. I just want to sit peacefully in my seat, but if you think this hat is worth creating a crisis over, then do what you need to do." His words carried a subtle challenge that rippled through the cabin. Some passengers exchanged incredulous glances, while others turned their attention squarely on Sarah, waiting for her to make a move. Every pair of eyes was now focused on her, their collective anticipation palpable. Steeling herself, Sarah met his gaze. Her voice, though steady, quivered ever so slightly at the edges. "Mr. Musk, for the comfort of all passengers, I must insist that you either remove the hat or relocate to the economy class section." Elon didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, a faint, enigmatic smile appeared on his face. "Very well," he said, his tone calm but laden with unspoken meaning. "If that's what you want, I'll comply." He stood, gathering his belongings with a composure that felt almost unnerving. As he turned to leave, he paused, leaning just close enough to Sarah to speak softly, his voice meant only for her. "I'll remember this." Sarah stood frozen, unable to react as he walked away. A mix of relief and unease washed over her, the weight of the moment leaving her rooted in place. She watched as Elon strode down the aisle of the first-class cabin, his shoulders straight, his steps unhurried. Before exiting, he cast one last glance back at her, his eyes sharp and glinting, with something she couldn't quite place. The words echoed in her mind. "I'll remember this." They struck her confidence like a hammer, leaving her struggling to maintain her composure. She could only watch as he disappeared from view, the atmosphere in the cabin shifting with his departure. A collective sigh of relief seemed to ripple through the passengers. Some exhaled audibly, while others exchanged knowing glances. The young businessman sank back into his seat, a smug expression plastered across his face. "You finally did the right thing," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "The airline needs people like you to uphold its values." Sarah nodded weakly, unable to find her voice. She didn't share his satisfaction. Instead, a deep unease began to creep into her chest, a sense that something wasn't right. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the empty glass on the tray in front of her. Back in the galley, Sarah leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath in an attempt to steady herself. She whispered under her breath, "I did the right thing. I was just doing my job." But the words felt hollow, and a nagging voice in the back of her mind told her she had crossed a line she couldn't come back from. Her colleague Laura, known for her steady presence and years of experience, approached her. But instead of her usual calm demeanor, Laura's expression was tense, her eyes filled with concern. "Sarah," Laura said, holding out her phone, "you need to see this." On the screen was a video, just over a minute long, clearly recorded by a passenger. The footage showed the entire encounter in first class, Sarah confronting Elon Musk, his calm responses, and finally, his parting words. Of the earlier incident, despite his composed exterior, his mind was anything but idle. Every interaction, every glance from the other passengers, and every whispered comment added fuel to the calculated thoughts forming in his head. Back in the galley, Sarah's colleague Laura tried to reassure her. "The captain is contacting corporate," she said, her voice steady. "We need guidance on how to handle this PR nightmare. They'll want a statement ready by the time we land." Sarah nodded mechanically, her thoughts racing. She glanced at her phone, which was now vibrating with notifications from the airline's internal app, a flood of alerts about the escalating situation. Every ping was another reminder of how quickly the world outside the plane was closing in on her decision. In first class, passengers were still murmuring amongst themselves. The businessman who had initially sparked the confrontation leaned back in his seat with a smug expression, sipping his drink as if he had won some moral victory. Nearby, the elderly couple seemed less animated now, but their disapproving glances at the flight attendants lingered like a silent rebuke. A young woman with a tablet quietly recorded the atmosphere in the cabin, narrating in hushed tones about the unfolding drama at 300 feet. In the economy cabin, Elon leaned slightly toward the window, gazing out at the endless expanse of clouds. A small, knowing smile played on his lips, as if he were already orchestrating his next move. The young engineer beside him hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "Mr. Musk, I hope you don't let this ruin your day. It's ridiculous how people overreact." Elon turned to him, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. "Overreaction," he said slowly, "often reveals deeper truths. Sometimes it's better to observe than to react." The engineer nodded, unsure how to respond, but Elon's enigmatic tone left him thoughtful. In the cockpit, the captain received a priority message from the airline's crisis management team. He glanced at his co-pilot, their shared look heavy with unspoken understanding. "Corporate's already drafting an apology," the captain said quietly. "They're expecting fallout." As the plane cruised steadily toward its destination, Sarah clung to her professionalism, greeting passengers and handling requests with an automatic efficiency. Yet her mind was clouded with the weight of the day's events. Somewhere deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Next, this situation has already spiraled far beyond what I ever imagined. Elon leaned slightly closer, his tone calm but pointed. "It's not just about a viral video. It's about perception, Sarah. People see these moments as symbols of something larger. Right or wrong, this will be interpreted in ways neither of us can control." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just trying to maintain order. I know, Elon said, his expression softening slightly. And sometimes maintaining order means navigating chaos. But remember, people are watching, and actions carry meaning even when unintended. The sound of a call button interrupted them, and Sarah instinctively stood up. I have to get back to work. Thank you for understanding. Elon nodded, picking up his magazine again. Good luck, Sarah. You'll need it. As she walked back up the aisle, she felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The turbulence had passed, but the storm surrounding the flight was far from over. Passengers continued to murmur, their reactions varying between lingering frustration and budding sympathy. When she reached the galley, Laura was waiting for her with an update. The captain says corporate is drafting an official statement. They've also instructed us to log every detail of the incident. Sarah sighed heavily. This day just keeps getting better, doesn't it? Laura gave her a small, encouraging smile. You handled the turbulence well. Just focus on what you can control. Sarah nodded, forcing herself to compartmentalize her anxieties. But deep down she knew this flight would mark a turning point, not just for her career, but for how she viewed her role in the increasingly complex world of public scrutiny and human emotion. Situation has placed the airline in a precarious position. Elon Musk isn't just any passenger. He's a global figure. His every move garners attention, and now, so does yours. Sarah swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. I was just trying to maintain order and ensure everyone's comfort, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark leaned forward, his expression unrelenting. Intentions matter, but outcomes matter more. Perception is everything in this business. Right now, we're being perceived as a company that overreacted and disrespected a high-profile customer. That video has already been viewed millions of times, and the backlash is growing by the second. I apologized to him, Sarah interjected. He accepted it. Maybe he... Mark raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. That's not the point. The court of public opinion has already begun deliberating, and the damage is done. We need to focus on damage control. What happens now? Sarah asked, her stomach churning. Mark leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly. The airline will issue a statement acknowledging the incident and emphasizing our commitment to professionalism and passenger respect. But Sarah... He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. You'll need to take some time away from active duty while we conduct a thorough review. Sarah's breath caught. A suspension? Not formally, Mark replied, his tone softer but firm. Think of it as a cooling-off period. This isn't a punishment, but we need to show both the public and our employees that we're handling this responsibly. Tears pricked the corners of Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them away. I understand, she said quietly. Mark nodded, his expression softening just a fraction. Good. For now, stay off social media, avoid interviews, and let the corporate team handle communications. We'll be in touch soon. As Sarah left the conference room, her steps felt heavier with each passing moment. She could still hear the faint hum of voices from reporters in the distance, their presence a stark reminder of how far the situation had escalated. Laura was waiting for her near the crew exit, her face a mixture of concern and sympathy. How did it go? She asked. I've been sidelined, Sarah replied, her voice flat. I'm sorry, Laura said softly. This whole thing spiraled out of control so quickly. Sarah managed a weak smile. It did, but I have to take responsibility for my part in it." As she stepped outside, the crisp evening air hit her face, offering a momentary reprieve from the weight on her shoulders. The airport's lights shimmered in the distance, and for the first time in hours, the world felt still. But deep down, Sarah knew her journey through this storm was only beginning. Stared at the table, her hands clasped tightly together. I didn't know," she whispered. "Of course you didn't," Mark said, his tone biting but controlled. "But ignorance doesn't change the consequences. What you saw as a small, manageable situation has snowballed into something far bigger than you could have anticipated." Sarah swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "What can I do now? How do I fix this?" Mark leaned back in his chair, his expression a mix of frustration and determination. "You can't fix it. Not alone, at least. The corporate team is already working on damage control. Statements are being drafted, meetings are being scheduled, and PR consultants are on the clock." Sarah nodded slowly, her mind racing. "But what about Mr. Musk? Has he said anything?" Mark shook his head. "Not yet. And that's part of the problem. The silence is deafening. The longer he stays quiet, the more speculation grows, and the harder it becomes for us to get ahead of the narrative." "I could reach out to him," Sarah offered hesitantly. "I could apologize again, personally this time." Mark frowned, considering the suggestion. "That might help, or it might make things worse. We can't afford another misstep. I'll discuss it with the team, but for now, you need to stay out of the spotlight. No interviews, no public statements, no social media activity. Understood?" "Understood," Sarah said quietly, her chest tight with anxiety. Mark stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Go home, Sarah. Take the time to reflect on this. We'll be in touch when there's a plan in place." Sarah rose to her feet, feeling a mix of relief and dread. As she walked out of the conference room, the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway felt oppressively long. Passengers and staff passing by cast fleeting glances her way, some curious, others judgmental. Laura was waiting outside, her face etched with concern. "How bad was it?" she asked. Sarah forced a weak smile. "Worse than I imagined," she admitted. "I had no idea Elon Musk was so deeply connected to the airline." Laura's eyes widened. "That's a twist. What happens now?" "I've been told to lay low," Sarah replied. "They're handling the fallout, but it's clear this isn't over." Laura placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "We'll get through this. You're not alone in this mess." Sarah nodded, grateful for the support, but still feeling the immense weight of her actions. She knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain, and she could only hope that time and the company's efforts would be enough to repair the damage. Too quick to act and made decisions that were neither fair nor professional. My intention was never to cause harm or discomfort, but I see how my actions led to that, and for that I am deeply sorry." Elon studied her, his expression unreadable, letting the silence linger for a moment before responding. "Your apology is noted," he said, his tone neutral but carrying an underlying weight. "However, intention and impact are two very different things. What you may have intended doesn't change the reality of what happened, or the consequences we're now facing." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding. "I understand. I know I handled the situation poorly, and I take full responsibility for my actions. If there's any way I can help rectify this—" Elon held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "This isn't just about rectifying what's already happened. It's about understanding the bigger picture. Do you know why I wore that hat?" Caught off guard, Sarah hesitated. "I assumed it was a personal statement," she said cautiously. Elon leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharpening. "It was, but not in the way you think. Sometimes people use symbols to test reactions, to see how individuals or systems respond under pressure. What happened on that flight told me a lot. Not just about you, but about the culture of this airline." Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. She started, but Elon continued, his voice calm but firm. "This airline prides itself on inclusivity and respect, correct?" "Yes," Sarah said quickly, feeling the weight of the words. "Then why was I treated differently because of a piece of clothing?" Elon asked, his gaze unwavering. Sarah had no answer. Her mind raced for a justification, but none came. She could only lower her eyes, her silence speaking volumes. Elon sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Look, I'm not here to ruin your career, Sarah, but I am here to ensure this airline doesn't lose sight of its values. Mistakes happen, but how we respond to them defines who we are. Do you understand?" "Yes," Sarah said softly, her voice tinged with both shame and determination. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Elon nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Good, because while this has been a learning experience for you, it's also a wake-up call for the entire organization. Change needs to happen, not just in how we train our staff, but in how we approach situations like this as a whole." "I'll do my part," Sarah promised. "We'll see," Elon replied, standing and extending a hand. "For now, focus on reflecting and growing from this. I'll be watching." Sarah shook his hand, the grip firm but not aggressive, and watched as he left the room. She exhaled deeply, the tension in her chest releasing slightly, but the weight of the experience still heavy. As she stepped out of the conference room, she realized this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a long journey toward redemption and growth. Conversation with a curt nod before leaving the room. The door closed behind him, and Sarah exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She remained seated for a moment, the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on her. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The scrutiny, the training, and the judgment from her colleagues and the public would be relentless. But Sarah also understood that this was her opportunity to not only redeem herself, but to grow into someone stronger and more capable. Gathering her composure, she stood and straightened her uniform. With renewed resolve, she walked out of the conference room, determined to face whatever came next head on. Meeting with the passenger, "I was worried it might turn into a scene, but you diffused the tension effortlessly." Sarah smiled faintly, though her heart still raced from the effort it took to stay composed. "Thank you," she replied. "I've learned the hard way that staying calm and professional is the best way to handle these situations." As she walked off the plane, Sarah reflected on how far she had come since the incident. She knew her journey of redemption wasn't over. There would always be challenges, moments of doubt and scrutiny. But now she felt more prepared to face them, armed with the lessons she had learned and a renewed commitment to her profession. She glanced at her reflection in the terminal window and saw not just the mistakes of her past, but the strength she had gained from confronting them. It wasn't just about redeeming herself to others, it was about proving to herself that she could grow and do better. "But a cornerstone of our values," she continued, her voice firm but sincere, I've realized that every decision we make has far-reaching consequences, not just for the individuals involved, but for the entire organization. I take full responsibility for my past actions and am committed to ensuring they are never repeated. Sarah concluded her presentation by sharing her vision for fostering better communication and understanding within the team, proposing initiatives for conflict management and enhanced training for all staff. When she finished, the room fell silent for a moment. Then Mark Donovan leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "Thank you, Sarah," he said. His tone measured. "Your presentation shows you've taken this opportunity seriously. However, words are one thing. Consistent actions are what truly matter." Elon Musk finally spoke, his voice cutting through the air with quiet authority. "Consistency is key, Sarah. You've demonstrated progress, but the real test will be how you apply these lessons moving forward, especially in situations as challenging as the one you faced with me." Sarah nodded, her gaze steady. "I understand, Mr. Musk. I'm ready to prove myself not just today, but every day." Elon's lips curved into a faint smile, one that was more approving than amused. "Good," he said. "Remember, the ability to adapt and grow is what sets great professionals apart from the rest." Mark looked around the room, then back at Sarah. "We'll be watching closely, but for now, welcome back. Make us proud." As the meeting concluded, Sarah left the conference room with her head held high. She understood the road ahead would still be demanding, but she felt more prepared than ever to walk it with integrity, empathy, and professionalism. From the far end of the corridor, Elon Musk watched her go, a thoughtful expression on his face. While the outcome of her journey remained to be seen, he felt a quiet satisfaction knowing he had given someone a chance to rise above their mistakes. "It's a fundamental responsibility," Sarah said, her voice steady. She stole a quick glance at Elon, who remained silent, his piercing gaze fixed on her. Taking a deep breath, she pressed on. "On a recent flight, I encountered a passenger carrying a controversial symbol. Instead of reacting emotionally, I stayed calm, listened attentively, and addressed the situation with empathy. The outcome was a smooth flight, and I believe that was due to the lessons I've learned from my past mistakes." As she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Mark Donovan leaned forward, his expression measured. "Sarah, I've been following your progress closely since the day you began this journey," he said, his deep voice filling the room. "I'll admit, I was skeptical about whether you could truly turn things around. But your presentation today, coupled with what we've seen in your recent work, has proved me wrong. You've shown genuine growth." Sarah bowed her head, gratitude welling up inside her. But she knew the person whose judgment mattered most had yet to speak. Elon Musk placed his pen on the table and looked around before fixing his gaze on her. "I don't easily trust someone after a significant mistake," he began, his tone deliberate and measured. "But what you've accomplished is something rare. You've faced your errors directly, without excuses or deflection, and you've made meaningful changes." He paused, and Sarah's heart raced as the room seemed to hold its breath. "The key now," Elon continued, "is to remember that change isn't a destination. It's an ongoing process. Keep proving this to yourself and others, every day." Relief washed over Sarah as she straightened. "Thank you, Mr. Musk," she said sincerely. "I'll carry this lesson with me always." For the first time, Elon offered a faint smile. "I believe you will," he said simply. The meeting concluded, and, as Sarah stepped out of the room, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This wasn't just an end. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one defined by resilience, humility, and purpose. As she made her way through the airport, she noticed Elon Musk speaking with Mark Donovan. When their eyes met, Elon gave her a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement that spoke louder than words. She returned the gesture with a smile and walked on, lighter than she'd felt in a long time. Back at work, Sarah brought a renewed sense of professionalism and empathy to her role. Each interaction with passengers, no matter how challenging, was approached with patience, understanding, and respect. Inside the conference room, Elon watched her silhouette fade down the hallway. A sense of satisfaction flickered in his expression, not just at Sarah's redemption, but at the larger lesson it symbolized. Mistakes are inevitable, but true character is revealed in how one learns and grows from them. Turning back to his work, Elon made a quiet decision to deepen his investment in the airline, not just for its potential as a business, but because of the people within it who were willing to rise above their flaws and strive for better. Sarah's journey was a testament to transformation and growth, proving that redemption is possible for anyone willing to embrace their mistakes and commit to change. Her story underscored a powerful truth. Professionalism, empathy, and respect are not just values to live by. They are keys to leading a meaningful and impactful life.